Welcome back to Decades of Dominance, Fantasy Football Week 3. We're going to cover add, start, sit. Sean, you want to kick it off with the quarterbacks?
Yeah, so obviously after a devastating week of injuries, that's going to play heavily into some of the things we talk about here. Starting at quarterback, um, the for the Chargers looks like the real deal, Abert.
Yeah, Justin
People
Herbert.
people are saying, people are saying that. Well, his coach said that Anthony Lynn said that if Tyrod's healthy, he's going to be our quarterback. What he actually said was if he's 100% healthy, he's going to be our quarterback. So, I mean, the kid looked like a real deal against the Super Bowl champion Chiefs. And even if Tyrod Taylor comes back and starts a few games, the rookie's going to get in there sooner rather than later. And when he does, I mean, he's almost startable. For my start this week, Tom Brady finds himself ranked outside of the top 12 quarterbacks, and I do think that he bounces back and finishes inside the top 12 this week with his matchup against a depleted Denver team. He's not going to let his running back score his touchdowns for him all the time. And inside the top 12 that I think will finish outside of it this week is Deshaun Watson, who is an extremely talented quarterback, all the respect in the world to him, but he's missing DeAndre Hopkins like we thought he would, and he's got a really tough matchup against the Steelers.
Yeah, they're off to a bad start, and Will Fuller looked like a great pickup in Week 1, and then he vanished from. He supposedly had an injury. They were playing with his hamstring, but then he was back on the field. But not to even have a target. Something's weird there, and yeah, I would feel uncomfortable trusting Watson if you have a better start. Um, let's move on to the running backs. Lots of major injuries this week with Saquon Barkley. That's a tough one, and Christian McCaffrey going out, at least not for the whole season, but that's another tough hit. So who are your picks at running back?
Yes, so for this week, um, you got to go with Mike Davis. He came in after Barkley went down, and I forget exactly how many, but he caught a bunch of passes. And this is, for the most part, our advice is tailored toward PPR leagues. If I can get a second mention here that's not completely dependent on injury, Myles Gaskin has quietly been the best running back for the Miami Dolphins. Uh, so if he's not added yet, you definitely want to add him as well.
Yeah, just a point there. Mike Davis subbed in from McCaffrey, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you said Barkley.
Oh yeah. I like for this week. Even though Christian McCaffrey is going to come back, while while he's out, Mike Davis is more valuable on your roster than either of the Giant running backs. If I have to go with a Giants running back, I'm taking Dion Lewis because he was active this past week and Wayne Gallman wasn't. That shows me the team likes Dion Lewis more than Wayne Gallman.
And Dion Lewis
So
did have a pass catching role a couple years ago with the Patriots. I know he kind of vanished in Tennessee behind Derrick Henry, but um, he was a back that was startable for a couple of years when he was with the Patriots. So it sort of depends on usage.
and there's also a chance that the Giants signed Devonta Freeman, in which case he would become the top ad.
Right. That's another good point. I mean, Devonta Freeman is probably worth, if you have dead spots on your roster, it's probably worth adding into your waiver list because somebody's going to grab him up. And who's
Yeah.
your sit this week? Or
Well, first
did you cover your start? Yeah, go ahead.
no. First, I'm gonna do my start. So, if you were one of those people who had one of the earlier drafts, and you drafted Leonard Fournette while he was still a Jaguar, and then, um, obviously threw your hands up in the air when they surprise cut him. Um, the good news is if you were patient and held on to him, it's going to pay off because he now will be the man in Tampa Bay, which is an even better situation. Um, I think he's going to take more and more work away from Ronald Jones, and he's already shown that he can do it all: run, catch, score touchdowns. So, I mean, I have Leonard Fournette as at least a top 20 running back going forward for the rest of the season. So he's definitely startable this week and pretty much for the rest of the year. My sit this week is David Johnson, similar to David Johnson did have a good week one, but I don't know how he's going to be able to sustain that. He doesn't look like the David Johnson of old, and he's got a brutal matchup against the Steelers defense, and they're not throwing him the ball enough to make him to give him that high PPR floor that we like. So out of the top 24 running backs, I think David Johnson is the least likely to finish in that top 24.
Yeah, Deshaun Watson isn't really making the secondaries back off as much, and David Johnson, he will have some good starts this year, but against the Steelers, I don't think this is going to be one of them. What about your wide receivers?
So for wide receiver ads, there's actually a ton that I'm thinking, but the one that people are not mentioning nearly enough, for 2 weeks now, Keelan Cole has been the top receiver on a Jacksonville offense that is surprisingly good throwing the ball. So if Keelan Cole is still out there, you definitely want to add him, and if he obviously continues, he's definitely worth starting each week as a wide receiver 3. But I don't know that I'm comfortable starting him just yet, but I'm definitely comfortable giving him a roster spot. So he's my top ad. Corey Davis was my top ad last week, and now he moves from top ad to he's the wide receiver outside of the top 36 that I think is most likely to finish inside the top 36. A.J. Brown looks like he's still going to be out, but even if he isn't, Davis is still the second best wide receiver on that team. Johnny Smith looks awesome at tight end for them as well, and Tannehill's throwing the ball more than anybody ever thought he would. So there's plenty of targets, and Davis still has plenty of talent after a down year last year. The wide receiver who's surprisingly to me ranked inside the top 36 that I think definitely will have a hard time finishing that way is Preston Williams. Preston Williams is not the 1B to Devontae Parker's 1A. Devontae Parker is far and away the number one receiver for the Dolphins, and Preston Williams is a distant second to him. And it's not like the Dolphins' passing offense is lighting the league on fire. So Preston Williams is not startable, in my opinion.
Yeah, he has had some played against some good defenses, and I think he's going to have his weeks this year. But I wouldn't trust him yet either. So a couple of names that I would add to that is, once again, you probably put a pretty high pick on Will Fuller, and I don't know if I'd be comfortable starting him until I know what's going on with him. You get 0 targets, 0 points.
He's
Other
one
wide
of the best
receivers that if you haven't added them, or if you have them and you haven't started them, Valdez Scantling and Lazard for Green Bay are likely to be elevated to the 1 and 2 spot with Devontae Adams hurt. So if he's not playing this week, then
Last I read was that his hamstring injury is, quote, his hamstring injury is not considered serious, but Valdez Scantling and Lazard are still worth roster spots at the very least.
Right.
even
If
with a
Adams, I
healthy
would say
Adams, the
if
way that
Adams is out and you have one of
performing.
those guys on your bench, you're looking to fill a flex spot, then you could do worse.
Yeah.
What about tight end?
Jordan Reed, welcome back to the land of fantasy relevance. I've liked this guy for a long time. I mean, when he's healthy, he's like the tight end version of Will Fuller. When he's healthy, uh,
Hmm.
and he's actually a better version than that because he doesn't have those weeks where he's fully healthy and still doesn't get anything. When he's healthy, he produces. And yeah, he got a lot of his chances this past week. It was against the Jets, and Kittle didn't play. But I think even when Kittle returns, the lack of other talent at wide receiver for San Francisco, I think San Francisco is going to become one of those teams where their you know, top targets are both tight ends. They're going to be running a lot more 12 personnel. And if you're worried about Jimmy Garoppolo being out for a while and it being Nick Mullen instead, Nick Mullen is just as good as Jimmy Garoppolo. So don't let that sway. Don't let that keep you from adding Jordan Reed. Get him on your roster. My start this week, I think Tom Brady is going to finally look to get Rob Gronkowski involved. Um, and against that depleted Denver secondary, I think he should be able to do it. Uh, I just think that he goes out of his way because people are talking about, Gronk's not doing anything, yada yada yada. So I think he's gonna pump his friend up this week and just pepper him with targets. My tight end sit. It was hard for me to pick a guy out of the top 12 tight ends that I really didn't like. Um, there is some concern about Waller as excellently as he just played tonight. There's some concern about him going against New England and New England being able to scheme away an offense's top weapon. But Carr's going to throw to Waller no matter what they do, whether it's a good idea or not. So I'm hesitant to put him on my sit list. Evan Ingram was the guy I was going to put here, but I had him on my sit list last week. So I'm going to go in a different direction. Um, Philadelphia's passing game is still kind of finding its way. And as much as I love both of their tight ends, it's kind of, I think it's unlikely that both of them finish in the top 12, and they're both ranked inside the top 12. And I think of the two, the one more likely to finish outside the top 12 is actually going to be Zach Ertz. So he's my sit.
Yeah, agreed on that. I mean, the other thing is, if you picked Ertz in kind of one of the early rounds, you may have gotten a backup tight end. And if I wouldn't say that it would be terrible to start Ertz, but if you have a better option on your bench, I mean, certainly if you picked a second tight end that is rising up the ranks, if you got yourself in the late rounds like a Jonnu Smith, I'd play Jonnu Smith this week.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that caps it off for week 3. Hope that helps you win your week. Decades of Dominance. Sean and Joe signing out.